Hi, everybody. Welcome to my analysis of the 2026 Kentucky Derby. Before we get into it, I'm very excited to announce that after 10 years, I'm finishing up my book on handicapping. Now, as many of you know who've seen my videos before or know of my work, I'm a very data-driven handicapper, and I believe to win in today's age with computer-assisted wagering, with whales, you have to use unique metrics. You can't hope to win using speed figures or class ratings or all of this kind of stuff. Because even if it's a good factor, it's going to be overbet. Andrew Beyer talked about this after he wrote his book on speed figures, picking winners, how quickly that edge eroded. And I think today it's even more important that you come in with unique metrics and a unique way of looking at the races. And this book will definitely provide that. In addition to the speed rations, which are basically my pace figures, I teach you guys how to compute form ratings. I rate workouts. Everything is data driven, so everything is tested. So you're going to see all kinds of unique statistics. And I dare say you're going to see some stuff that you've never seen before. And again, in a betting market, in a speculative market, you need things that other people don't have. I think this book will provide it. And so I'm very excited to finally be finishing it up. So let's move on to the Kentucky Derby. And we'll talk about some of those metrics that I was just talking about. We're going to start with the horse Renegade. Now, this is a horse that I'm just going to come out and say it. I think he's a terrible favorite. This horse is 4-1. I was looking at some of the early betting. It looks like he's a little bit higher than that, but he is holding favoritism, at least at this point. Todd Pletcher trainee, unlike a lot of Todd Pletcher trainees, this guy does have some experience, but there's a lot of things I don't like. And let's talk about some of those racing truisms and the betting markets, like I was just referencing. You would think that a high auction price on a horse would be a very good sign. It is a positive. This is a horse you paid a lot of money for. It'd be like going out and buying an expensive car. You expect a certain level of performance. But we're not betting on the cars, because if we were, people would understand that a Ferrari will probably outgun my little Versa that's sitting out there in the driveway. Same is true with betting. So that's why we're always looking for unique metrics or to take a contrarian stance. And if you look at horses that sold at auction for $500,000 or more, they're 1 for 47 in the Kentucky Derby. Renegade is one of those horses. Now, again, I'm not saying that that means that they can't win. It's just something to be aware of. People will bet just based on that, because a lot of times, of course, these horses will couple that with good performances on the track. The other thing that I don't like about this horse, and this is a fairly new metric that I've started using, is the speed range is very, very tight. And what I did here is looked at a statistical means of predicting the next speed figure. So we're not looking at trip. We're not looking at all the factors that we all know definitely have an influence on a horse's speed figure. I'm just looking at it statistically. And when you have tight ranges like this, it kind of limits the amount that you can improve. When you couple that in the Kentucky Derby with a horse that was foaled in January, that also reduces this horse's runway. In other words, in the Kentucky Derby, you want a horse that's precocious. It has to show talent right away. But you don't want a horse to show talent and never improve. It has to improve to win the Kentucky Derby. That's why, if you look at the foaling month, later months tend to perform better. April, even May. May, the IV is lower, but the return is much, much greater. By the way, speaking of IV or impact values, that's just a measure of whether a characteristic is winning more often than it should or less often than it should, or the same as it should. Because a lot of people will look at the Kentucky Derby and they'll make judgments based on the winning rate. Like, they'll see, I remember when everybody's saying, Todd Pletcher's terrible in the Derby because he's got like a 6% success rate. Well, you got 20 horses generally. So 5% is really what you're looking to beat. That's what the impact values do. They look at a certain characteristic, certain factor, look at how many times it's represented, and therefore basically get a ratio. So 1.00 means it has no impact. Greater than 1 means it has a positive impact. Less than 1, it's a negative impact. And if you look at did I put the IV? I did, for the Curran speed points, 0 to 1 Curran speed points. Renegade has no early speed either, a 0.47. The other problem with that, looking at it in terms of this Derby, is that there's no speed in this Derby. There was one 8-point Curran horse. And by the way, the Curran speed points just measure early speed. William Curran was a handicapping author, wrote books back in the 70s, 80s, somewhere in that vicinity. And it's just a measure of early speed. There's one Curran 8-point speed horse in this year's Derby, and it's an also eligible. So he's not even going to draw in. So the next one is So Happy, who has 7 Curran speed points. You'll notice this guy has 1. So that's another issue for him, is working out a trip, because you're also going to hear about the one post position, and you can't win from the one post position. I've been waiting for a Kentucky Derby horse that I like from the one post position, because people did the same thing, or have done the same thing with the one hole. They said, well, look at this, it's only 4%. Okay, that's close to average. And when you look at it historically, by the way, the one post position has won, I believe, more often than any other post position, but it's definitely not underperformed. Then people say, well, it's the 20 horses, it forces the horses in and so forth. They made changes to that, but it's just one of those things. I just want to pay that much attention to it. But for a horse like Renegade, yeah, it could be a problem, because he's probably going to get shut off. Now, I do think, these trainers and jockeys can read the form too. They know that there's not as much speed as typical derbies. So you are going to see, I believe, some of these jockeys and trainers adjusting. I don't know if Renegade is one of those horses that can, though. Just don't know if he's got that kind of tactical speed. The other thing I believe very firmly in a race like the Derby, well, in races in general, if you are asking a horse to do something it's never done before, and by that I mean style-wise, or more than just, oh, it's going 10 furlongs, because none of them have gone 10 furlongs. Yeah, that's not really what I'm talking about. Is, are you asking it to do something it's not accustomed to? I think if you're going to, you need to insist on prices. And that's why a lot of times I'm much quicker to throw out a horse at 4-1 like Renegade than I would be if he were 40-1. If he were 40-1, I'd make some arguments for him. But in this case, most of the arguments are negative, because I just think that price is too low. Let's move on to the next horse. That is Albus. This horse is 30-1 on the morning line. I don't think he's going to get bet. And the big reason for that is he's coming out of the Wood Memorial. You will hear people say that the Wood is a terrible prep. It used to be very good. It's no longer any good. There is some validity to that, in the fact that the race really hasn't been good for a long time. It tends to draw the same fields, that run the same fractions, the same time, and so forth. Problem with Albus, you'll notice that -10 LSR, that is really light for a horse in the Kentucky Derby that doesn't have a lot of early speed. Albus might be one of those that shows more early speed, though. In fact, I would pretty much guess that he's not going to be as tardy early as he was in the Wood. That said, there's still some things going against him. One of them is he's just not that quick. He also has a fairly constricted speed figure range. To help some of you out, I computed all the Racing Post ratings, because there are Racing Post ratings for the foreign horses, which there are not any speed figures for the foreign horses if you're looking at American sources. Well, there might be some, but certainly not Brisnet and not the Beyer figures. So Albus had a 105 Racing Post rating last time. To give you a comparison, that's kind of similar to what you see from some of the Dubai horses, and 114 was the number given to Renegade, who I just told you I don't really like that much. So Albus has a lot of work to do in terms of speed. He's one of those horses that I think could be used underneath. I wouldn't be too excited using him on the top of my tickets, though. This guy is extremely interesting. He's 50-1 on the morning line, and you'll notice that his name is in red. What that means is that his speed range is below par. His highest figure on the speed range is below par, and he also has poor form. These horses do not win in the Kentucky Derby. So that's the first thing I'll say. But everything else is really, really intriguing. Take a look at those workouts. After that workout on April 19th is when Jeff Mullins decided to shoot for the Kentucky Derby. He said he was very surprised by how good that work was. Take a look at what he did the next time. Went from 47-2 to 45. That's one of the fastest workouts I've ever seen for the Kentucky Derby. The problem as it relates to Intrepido is that this horse, I think, might have some distance limitations. So I'm not sure if having some blazing 4 furlong workouts is what the doctor ordered. But I still find it interesting. And there are some things to like here. The form rating is a huge negative, a 21.4% for that last race. Horses with a form rating of less than 25%, I don't know if I listed it there, but they haven't won. Yeah, there you go. Less than 45%, 0 for 105 in the Kentucky Derby. Again, keep in mind, we're only looking at about a 5% for average, but still, you haven't had a winner. It's generally not a positive factor because most of the horses coming into the Kentucky Derby are coming in off of their best. Horses that don't run well, generally taken off the trail, or they don't earn the points. So that's going to be a problem for Intrepido, but there are some things to like here. He is a horse that I would consider using underneath. Let us move to litmus test. Here again, you have another horse that is in red, indicating the poor finish, the poor speed figure range. He's also adding blinkers, and horses adding blinkers in the Kentucky Derby are 0 for 26. Generally, equipment changes in the last 3 months, not great. Whether that's adding blinkers, taking them off. You did have Sea Hero that won after removing blinkers. There are some exceptions, but it's still going to be a very, very low IB, definitely like in that 0.5 range. So not something that is a positive by any stretch of the imagination. And really the idea here is you want horses that the trainer has a plan, they know what they're doing, and everything is going according to that plan or pretty close. Little things that throw off a horse's training or whatever the case may be can have a huge impact in the Kentucky Derby. It's kind of like that pebble in a pond, the ripple effect. So talk about that in my book too. The butterfly effect. Litmus test is not a horse that I would be considering. Right to Party, there is something interesting about this horse. First of all, horses that were 15-1 or greater in their final prep, a 0.2 impact value. I will tell you guys that Country House destroyed a lot of these statistics. And it's unfortunate because he didn't really win. He won by disqualification. It's the same thing with Medina Spirit. I don't even know the name of the second place horse. And I don't consider that horse the winner of the Kentucky Derby because they literally paid on Medina Spirit. Now, in the case of Country House, they disqualified, I believe it was Maximum Security at the time. But Country House was not affected by any of the trouble that Maximum Security caused. So that's what I consider kind of a lucky win. And it did screw up some of these stats because there just wasn't a lot to like about that horse. Right to Party, you've got the same issues that you had with Albus. He ran in the wood. He was second. It was a slow race. Horses that were not well regarded in their last start, I started to talk about that, generally do not do well. Just a 0.2 impact value in the Kentucky Derby. And the reason for that is what I stated earlier. You want a horse that's precocious, that shows ability, and is improving. When a horse just kind of comes out of nowhere, generally not a good sign. Although, this is another factor in betting markets, you get paid for horses that do that. So Right to Party, those are the things I don't like. What I do like is this horse is one of two that has an improving form cycle. That's another metric that I recently added to my arsenal. And it's a very positive thing. It doesn't pop up very often, but it's a very, very positive thing. Likewise, horses with negative form cycles are horses to be avoided. But Right to Party, I did like that part. So everything else, not much to speak about. Weak LSRs as well. Let's take a look at Commandment. Now, this is one of those guys that I talked about earlier, or maybe I didn't. I forgot what I said. But I put the horses that had positive speed ranges and good form in green. Commandment, definitely one of those. And one of the things that I love about Commandment, you guys remember, I did a video, I think it was 2 years ago now, about big wins leading to Kentucky Derby wins. And I had a lot of people kind of skewer me for that. And I still stand by it, and it's been very successful as a Kentucky Derby factor. And the reason I think it's been successful is because it shows a horse that's able to separate from its competition, no matter what that competition was. because again, these horses are improving. So I don't care if the horse won by 5 lengths, and that is what I classify a big win as, a 5-length win. I don't care if it won by 5 in a maiden claimer, if it won by 5 in a stakes race. I just love that it won by 5 or more, because it again shows that ability to separate from its competition. And that's what we're looking for. Commandment did that, and he did it at Churchill Downs. And at Churchill Downs, that is a huge factor when you have a big win by 5 lengths or more at Churchill Downs. Sovereignty, last year's Kentucky Derby winner, showed this same pattern. And the IV on that, do I have the IV? I don't, but I have the return 1194. That's the highest ROI of any of the Derby factors that I looked at. The slow workout last time is a bit of a problem. And I've had people criticize me for this too. Well, you can't put a percentage or you can't put a number to workouts. Well, we can put number, you're watching a digital version. These are all numbers. But people tell me all the time, well, you can't use numbers. That's why we have AI, and it's terrible. It doesn't do anything. It's just not true. Generally, you want to work out well. You want to work out fast. If I were to go to the gym and just, let's say throw on weights that are well beneath my ability level, how much is that going to do for me? Well, you can do a lot of reps there. Yeah, I could. I could do a lot of reps. And there's something to be said for that. There's something to be said for working out. There's something to be said for walking. But in general, and this is why Bob Baffert, in my opinion, excels in the Kentucky Derby, because he gets it. He understands that these workouts are meant to add conditioning. They're meant to move the horse forward. I don't like these slow works. And honestly, I think that's one of the problems that the Japanese horses face, is because this is their workout regimen, generally long gallops. I don't know if that translates to American racing, but we shall see. They got a lot of talented horses. It's going to happen one of these days. Commandment is one of these horses, like I said, that I do like. You notice the $500,000 auction purchase. You're always going to get positives and negatives with these horses. I don't like the 6-1. I will tell you that I think Brad Cox is loaded in this year's Kentucky Derby. Not like loaded like he's been drinking a lot. He's just got a lot of talent in this year's Kentucky Derby. And this is one of them. The speed figures, I'm not so sure about. This is a February foal, which is not terrible. I don't know how much improvement he's got in him, but this is a really good horse. And the 6-1 is what I don't like. Like, where is that price going to be? I think 6-1 is a little bit low, but this is a good horse. This is a horse that I would definitely consider. This is one of the Japanese entries, and you'll notice he's got 2 big wins, so I like that. The breeding is actually something that I like. Maxfield was known more as a sprinter, but you're going to hear this when we get to So Happy. People are going to talk about Run Happy. Well, he's a sprinter. He can't go the distance. In fact, I was reading about it in some Kentucky Derby write-ups. You guys should remember that when Secretariat ran in the Kentucky Derby, you know what the knock against him was? He was out of Bold Ruler. Bold Ruler was a champion sprinter. Secretariat can't go the distance, or might have trouble going the distance. Secretariat, in my opinion, is probably the greatest distance horse of all time. Having that speed is not a negative. And I was never convinced that Run Happy couldn't go a distance. I don't think he ever had an opportune time to do it. Felt the same way about Quality Road. Sometimes the circumstances just aren't right, and you don't get the ideal timing when you're trying to go around a ground. Kentucky Derby being a great example. A lot of these horses, this will be the only time they ever run 1.25 miles. So if they run poorly in this race, does that mean they can't go 1.25 miles? I don't think so. It's great competition. So again, the problem with the Japanese horses are really the conditioning. We just don't know anything about him. This guy, 106 Racing Post rating, which is very light. You'll remember, I think it was last year or maybe the year before, I liked one of the Japanese entrants a lot. But that horse had like a 119 Racing Post rating. It was through the roof. This guy, not so much. So, hard call on him. Not one that I would toss, but not one that I would be excited about. So Happy. I was just talking about this horse. So again, you're going to hear about the pedigree. And I want to bring up the dosage index, because a lot of you older fellers like myself will remember when this was all the rage. Remember the dosage plus the experimental free handicap? dosage, and I know Steve Roman quite well. I think he's a brilliant guy. I've never been really thrilled with the dosage index. And I've talked to a lot of breeding experts who feel the same way that I do. I don't think you can just look at the sire and think that that's where all the ability comes from. I mean, us as human beings, we get things from both parents. So I just don't think that you can just look at the sire. And the dosage index was basically back tested, and then it was changed. In fact, I noticed, I won't mention the guy's name, but he's a writer I greatly respect. But he talked about how Justify had a 3.00 dosage index. No, he didn't. Not when the Derby was run. He didn't, just like Strike the Gold didn't have a qualifying dosage index when the Derby was run. That happened afterwards when they changed the classifications of these sires, and then you get the lower dosage index. If you look at the dosage index over the last 21 years, 6 horses have had a dosage index greater than the cutoff, which was 4.00. 6, including the 2 Triple Crown winners. Again, I'm counting Justify as a Triple Crown winner. So I don't look at So Happy's dosage index or the belief by so many that Run Happy is a speed sire as a negative. Look at what this horse has done on the racetrack. This horse is an April foal, so he's fairly young. He's shown a lot of improvement. He's got the second best last race Brisnet speed figure. His speed figure range is good. His form is good. And the kicker is, this could be your early leader. He's got the most Kieran speed points. And I think he's the horse most apt to take the lead. And I love Mike Smith on him too, because say what you will, Mike Smith is like my age, but this guy knows how to ride. And by the way, I didn't put this in my book because jockey stats change, but Mike Smith is great on front runners. You know who he's not great on is closers, which is odd because of course he was the regular jockey of Zenyatta, but his numbers with front runners are great. I think this is a great pairing. I think this horse stands a big chance on the first Saturday in May. Now, there are some negatives too, of course, in that, he's there's nothing that stands out that makes you think, oh, this horse is going to jump up on Kentucky Derby Day. But like I said, tactically, I think he's going to get a great, great run. Let's take a look at the Puma. I'm understanding that this guy is getting a lot of attention. He's kind of the insiders, the wise guy horse. And if you know anything about the Kentucky Derby and the wise guy horse, you know that you should just toss them. they never win. And I'm not saying the Puma should be tossed. I'm just joking about that. But I don't like these insider horses because it affects the price, and the price is everything when you're betting these kinds of races. 10-1 on the morning line is already kind of low. He had no starts as a 2-year-old, which, by the way, is funny. We had the curse of Apollo. No horse that hadn't started as a 2-year-old had won the Kentucky Derby in like 100 years. And then Justify comes along and not only wins the Kentucky Derby, but wins the Triple Crown. And suddenly, we're getting all kinds of horses that didn't start as 2-year-olds. Racing has changed. I readily admit that. If you look at just the starts for these horses, it's just not the same. And by the way, it tends to make that improvement factor even greater because these horses don't have the experience. So those jumps in ability are much greater than they used to be in the past, like when, say, Citation ran and some of those horses. The Puma did not start as a 2-year-old, but he was a February foal. So it's not like he was a late foal, yet he didn't really get started early. He does show the improving figures. I understand that part of it. If you look at his LSRs, those have been steadily increasing. The speed figures look pretty good. Speed figure range is not bad. I also like the fact that he gained 2 positions, he actually gained 2 positions, but the stat that I have is 2+ positions on the turn. That's a very, very powerful stat. I remember, I think it was Count Turf made a massive move on the turn. He was a big long shot when he won the Kentucky Derby, and very, very impressive move. The Puma is showing the same thing here. This is the kind of horse that's tough for me, though, because I got to see what the odds are going to be. It's not a horse that I'm, again, real excited about using as my top choice because there are some negatives here. And If the price is short, it's like, where is the upside? Let's move on to Wonder Dean. This is my highest rated horse, my highest rated foreign horse, and he's got the best racing post rating, a 112 racing post rating. That is the best of all the foreign horses. He chased a swift pace in the UAE Derby. Now, that is noteworthy because the biggest problem with these horses, well, not the biggest, but it is a problem with these horses that ship in from the UAE Derby, is that they generally go up against very slow paces. Now, it is a standing start in that race, so that's obviously going to affect some of those early fractions. But nonetheless, they're just not fast paces. They're not fast races. And then these horses come to the United States and they just get swallowed. So Wonder Dean, having chased that fast pace, is interesting. He's a Japanese horse that ran in the UAE Derby. I find that angle interesting. He also had my S blank blank T rating. He had the second highest. Now, that is the Simon Historical Investment Technique. You can figure out what the initials are. I've always had fun with that over the years, but it has been pretty effective. Now, it is largely back tested too, so you got to look at it kind of like you would the dosage. I hope it's not as bad as the dosage, but it actually had maximum security a couple years ago, and it had sovereignty ranked pretty high too. But those horses have typically done well, and horses with an S blank blank T rating of less than 0 have not done well, although there have been some exceptions. Again, one of them was in that DQ Country House. So this is a horse that I do find interesting. Also had a big win as a 2-year-old in a route race. And so definitely some things to like. Price is going to be really, really important. I just don't believe you can take any kind of a low price on a horse from the UAE Derby. And I think I've said this before, I'll say it again. I think it's a joke that it's a grade 2. I think that's just a way to kind of increase that foreign representation. Incredible. This horse actually has some things to like. However, the big one that I don't like, there's one that I really don't like, and then one that I kind of don't like. Horses coming off a 6-week layoff in the Kentucky Derby just won for 68. That's a minor factor to me. And the reason I say that is because throughout the last, let's say, 20 years, you would have said, well, you don't want a horse that last raced more than 30 days ago, and it's more than 35 days ago, and it's more than 42 days ago. It's changed. Again, racing has changed a lot, and this is one of them. We just see more horses coming off layoff. So I don't look at this as a disqualifying factor, but it's not a positive either. The big thing here is that 31-point speed improvement. Once again, you're looking for a precocious horse that's gradually ramping up. You're not looking for the massive leaps because you can't trust that. That's what I was talking about with a horse that, last won at, let's say, 50-1. Now it's in the Kentucky Derby. I can't trust where that horse is actually at. I can't really trust Incredible. There are some good things here. I don't like the fact that it lost position on the turn in that last race, but this horse has the best median LSR, and that has been extremely effective in terms of winning, not in terms of price. It's definitely been bet, but a 3.35 impact value. So that part is good, but mostly negative on this guy. Chief Wallaby, I'm going to say the same thing, and this is one that I think is definitely going to be an underlay. 8-1 on the morning line. Just a lot of things that I don't like. Slow last workout, and then blinkers, adding blinkers today. I don't think that's a great thing. I talked about that earlier. Not a lot of experience. This is another horse that, started racing as a 3-year-old, yet was born in February. Not a lot to like in my book. Again, at the price, 8-1, I think just too low. Let's go to Silent Tactic. 104 racing post rating last time, a 107, and it is his best. Very narrow speed range here again, and this is a guy that has to jump up. He must improve. He is an April Fool, so he does have a longer runway to improve, but not one that I would be super excited about. Potente, I find very interesting for one reason. Say what you will about Bob Baffert, and I've had good things to say and I've had bad things to say, but there is nobody better at getting a horse ready for the Kentucky Derby. Nobody. And a big reason for that is Baffert knows how to prepare these horses. And this is the kind of horse that he excels with. This is a lightly raced horse. Baffert does it. I've said before, like Pletcher, that's really not his thing. Baffert, it's definitely his thing, and especially horses with speed. Now, the big thing with Potente, this guy sold for $2.4 million at auction. And by the way, if you notice in his first start, he was the 3-5 favorite. This is what I'm talking about. It wasn't news to the people who know anything at the racetrack that this horse was a very expensive horse and is trained by Bob Baffert. So there's a lot to like about this horse from a talent standpoint. Look at that last workout, 57-4, typical Baffert. 5 furlongs, very, very important. By the way, in my book, I talk about this, the importance of 5 furlong workouts. Barry Meadow talks about it in his book too. Again, we can talk about how, it's not how fast you go, it's how you go fast and all these different things with workouts. We got these workout ratings and so forth, but some of it is very basic. And working out at a reasonable distance when you're racing a reasonable distance makes a lot of sense. Baffert has always done that. He's always. Pletcher is known more for 4 furlong workouts. When it's Baffert, you're going to get a 5 furlong workout, and typically you're going to get a fast 5 furlong workout. It's exactly what we have with this horse. This is another guy that has a lot of speed and could put himself in an extremely good position. Now, one of the negatives on him is the 12.81 second. I call it the final furlong. That's actually not true. It's an average of the last 3 furlongs. And I just did that because, of course, the distances vary. But this was made popular by Colonel Bradley back in the day and then revisited by Jenny Reese. And so I think a lot of people think Jenny Reese came up with it, but it's looking at the last 3 furlongs and how fast you go. And I found if you go basically a 38, so that's 12 2/3 second per furlong, that's a very positive factor. If it's over that, it's generally negative. This guy is over that. But again, it's Bob Baffert. I've seen many times when he sent out horses like this and they don't stop. And again, the excellent last workout, lot to like about Potente in this year's Kentucky Derby. He might be an overlay, even though he is a Baffert. Emerging market, man, you talk about mixed signals. This guy, first of all, I do want to note something. You notice that I say Pratt sticks with this guy. And right before I started recording this video, I took a look at jockey switches because that's something else that I look at in my reports. And believe it or not, horses that are losing their jockey, and there are several. In fact, a lot of the Brad Cox horses are losing their regular rider, actually perform better in the Kentucky Derby than those who are retaining a popular jockey or have a popular jockey. And again, there are lots of reasons for this. I've talked before about the betting markets. That's a big part because everybody knows it. The second part is that we don't really know why the jockey left one horse for another horse. In some cases, yes, they think the other horse is better. In cases like the Kentucky Derby, a lot of times you have allegiances, and you've got to be looking out for your career down the road. And obviously, with Flavien Prat, you have Chad Brown. And I forget which other horse Flavien Prat rode. We'll see it coming up. But Flavien Prat sticks with this one. Is it because he thinks the emerging market is better? Maybe. But it could be Chad Brown. You don't really want to get on the bad side of Chad Brown because that's a, winner's font right there. So this guy has the best high speed figure in the race. What does that mean? That's looking at that speed range, and the high figure, projected high figure, is the highest in the race. 6/23 in the Kentucky Derby. That is better than looking at the last race best figure. Because people always tell you, like, speed figures, they don't matter. And that's why they do matter in the Kentucky Derby, because everybody thinks they don't matter. That is a very, very powerful factor. 5.24 impact value. That means they're winning 5 times as often as they should, and you're getting a 391 ROI. April, birth month. That's another positive because this is a horse that, again, has a longer runway and can still improve. He only had 2 starts. The problem here is horses with less than 3 starts in the Kentucky Derby. Again, take this with a grain of salt, but 0 for 4, and none of them have hit the board. It's really tough to do in the Kentucky Derby with very little experience. On the plus side, there's some things that I think will boost this guy's price. The Louisiana Derby is another one of those races that nobody thinks is a good prep. And I understand that. Typically, it's not going to draw top tier horses. Once again, if you look at Kentucky Derby stats, guess what race produces the most Kentucky Derby winners? If you said grade 1 races, you are correct. Guess what races produce the best payoffs? Grade 2, grade 3, and ungraded. Only when you drop out of stakes company altogether and go allowance races or maiden races, you're just not winning. But you'll remember that Mind That Bird won the Sunland Derby. That was an ungraded race, or he actually didn't win it. I think he finished 4th in that race, but he came out to win the Kentucky Derby. I learned more from Mind That Bird than probably any other horse in racing, because there was so much to learn from him. Because at the time, I didn't like him at all. But he came out of an ungraded race. There's been lots of horses that have come out of, either the Spiral Stakes, that was Animal Kingdom. Now it's called the JR Stakes. But these kinds of races, so don't dismiss a horse just because it came out of a grade 2. People who do that with emerging market could be making a mistake. Based on that speed figure stat alone, he's a must use for me. And then you've got solid workouts ever since that race. So, lot to like. Pavlovian is a horse that I've heard some people talking about, and I'm going to admit that I don't really get it. Now, he's got the best median ESR. That has been a good factor in the Kentucky Derby. But I ask, is he a true front runner? You'll notice that only in those last 2 races did he show front speed, and that came after he removed blinkers and then added them back, and he was going a longer distance. You'll notice the Louisiana Derby, that's 9.5 furlongs. Is he going to show that same kind of speed in a race with other horses coming out of shorter races? Because as a general rule, I don't think it's controversial to say if you have a horse that is a front runner in a sprint compared to a front runner in a route, generally the front runner in the sprint is going to be faster early. Pavlovian, I just have questions about, and I think he needs to be a front runner in the sense that that's going to give him his best chance of winning. So tactics for me are everything. What are they going to do with this horse? You'll notice too that his average, he was just below the cutoff point for the final furlong factor, or whatever they call it. His S.T rating, a minus 205. There have been no winners of the Kentucky Derby with a rating that low. Doesn't mean that he can't win, but I'm not thrilled. And you'll notice that the IV, when that rating is negative, is just 0.35. So I've heard some good arguments for Pavlovian, but I'm going to take a counter view, and I'm not going to use Pavlovian. 6 speed. This is the guy that set the pace in the UAE Derby. And there were I saw a chart where they removed the first, I think it was the first 100 yards, 100 meters. They just looked at the first 400, second 400. And according to that, he would have run a 4 furlong split of about 45.5. That's extremely fast. They went very slow down the lane. And once again, I don't know how that translates. I also think that this guy has a very questionable pedigree, which I believe was brought up before the UAE Derby. But I found the same thing. I'm just not really thrilled with it. He does have a big win. He does have that speed. He would be very intriguing to me if he actually got the lead. With Brian Hernandez, he's no stranger to Churchill Downs. I could see that potentially happening. So he's not without a chance, but again, not a horse that I'm overly exuberant about. All right, now we get to further ado. This guy has so many positives, it's hard to categorize him. And then he's got some negatives too. But he's got 2 big wins. He won his final prep by over 5 lengths. That alone has a 2.94 impact value and $2.38 ROI in the Kentucky Derby. Now, here's the funny thing. None of the big wins, or no horse won the Kentucky Derby when the big wins were recorded at Keeneland. Further ado, both of his big wins were at Keeneland. Now, I'm going to dig into that a little deeper because I think there's a reason for that. Some of you older horse players will remember that at one time, Keeneland was like a conveyor belt. You remember Sinister Minister? I remember I was doing the Thoroughbred Connection radio show, and that was one of my picks for the Bluegrass Stakes, and he won it like 6-1. He won big, just won in a romp. But he was not a legitimate Kentucky Derby horse, and I didn't play him in the Kentucky Derby. That track was a conveyor belt. It was especially speed favoring when he ran, and he won easily. And so a lot of those big wins you're going to see come from front runners. They get on the lead, they get an easy lead, and they just start pulling away. Very much like Secretariat in the Belmont Stakes, although it went very, very quick at all stages in that race. But Further Ado didn't have that. And then you'll remember, too, Keeneland for a while was an all-weather track. So again, different. It's not the same as the old Keeneland. And so Further Ado's effort was extremely good. But you'll notice that he broke his maiden at Keeneland by 20, which is even better than that last race. He loses Ortiz, but we just talked about that. That's actually a positive in a very strange way. He's got the fastest last race Brisnet speed figure. His speed figure range, he's got the second highest high figure to emerging market. The best racing post rating in that last race by 3 points. The next highest is Renegade, and there's another horse with 114. He's got tactical speed. Other negative, $550,000 auction purchase. He's got the best Simon Historical Investment Technique rating. That's another positive. This guy is a must-use. He should be favored. I don't understand. I don't think he's even the second favorite. I think he's like the third favorite. And maybe on Kentucky Derby Day, he'll get more action. But I don't get it. This guy should definitely be the favorite in this year's Kentucky Derby. He will definitely be on my tickets. Let us move because I want to wrap this up. We're at 42 minutes already. Golden Tempo. Golden Tempo is the other horse that has a positive form cycle. So that alone, I think, makes him a contender. Adding the blinkers in the last race, talked about equipment changes, that's definitely a negative. 0 for 21, he's got a negative Simon Historical Investment Technique rating and 0 Huron speed points. This is a guy I think could definitely come up underneath, though, and add some value. And again, I think that form cycle is very, very positive. There's some things to like about this guy. Let us move on to the 20. That is Full Effort, another horse that I actually like quite a bit. And this may surprise some people, probably won't surprise others. Having a turf-leaning pedigree is actually a really good thing at Churchill Downs. First of all, horses coming off all weather have a positive ROI. Horses with that turf pedigree, and I was just looking at the Briz ratings to determine this. They have produced a 1.51 impact value and a 229 ROI. 140 points on my historical investment technique and a big win as a juvenile. Also, check out that last race. That was in the JR Stakes on an all-weather track. And you'll notice that this horse is not run on a dirt track. It's been all-weather and turf. And look at the positions gained on the turn. Now, why is that impressive? Because most of the time, dirt horses move on the turn. If you remember the old Sarton methodology, this is one of the things they were looking at is turn time. Dirt horses tends to be like a key portion of the race in dirt races. In turf races, it's actually not the stretch, the actual stretch, which is only about a furlong or two. It's the full length after coming off, basically after you come off the turn. So basically in that straightaway. That's when most turf horses make their winning move. So the fact that Full Effort did it on the turn and was already leading at the actual stretch call is a really good sign to me. I love the fact that he's got 140 historical investment technique points. I love the big win as a juvenile. This is another horse that I think you have to use. And take a look at the trainer, Brad Cox. and he's losing his jockey as well. We're going to take a look at one more. I don't want to look at the alsos past this. Great White, 50-1 on the morning line, and Deserved. This is a horse that just got crushed in the bluegrass, and that's just not a good factor. And if you'll notice, this horse has always been higher odds, too. This is not a horse that was really very highly regarded. May foal, so a big chance to improve, but he'd have to improve a ton. He's also a front runner without a lot of speed. So that is my look at the Kentucky Derby. Again, I think you have to use Further Ado. I mentioned some others to use. Further Ado would be a horse that I would use in all my exotics, basically as an exotics key. And then I would use some of the others if you're betting horizontals. And hopefully I gave you some horses that maybe solidified your opinion, or maybe, weakened your opinion, or maybe you didn't have an opinion and it helped in that regard. If it did, please press the like button and share button and subscribe button and all that good stuff. And look out for my book coming soon. Thank you all for watching. Hope you have a great Kentucky Derby day.